Please comment where you're watching for, and please consider becoming a channel member to support our channel. Friends used to tease me, saying I could turn down a date just because the guy blinked too slowly. But after a few years of therapy and some self-reflection, I decided to loosen up and give people more of a chance. That's how I ended up on a third date with Jareth. Jareth was impressive. There's no other word for it. He was tall, built like someone who took his protein powder seriously, and he had that quiet, competent demeanor that makes you feel instantly safe. Or at least, I thought it did. He worked in both the military reserves and law enforcement, two professions that fascinated me and set off a few internal alarms at the same time. It wasn't that I had anything against people in those fields, but I'd had enough exposure to PTSD and emotional volatility in family members to know that those experiences can leave deep marks. Still, Jareth seemed emotionally stable, even warm. I had no reason to say no when he asked me over for dinner at his place after 3 great dates. "I'll cook," he said with a sheepish smile. "Or, well, I'll at least order something fancy and pretend I did." He laughed, and I found myself laughing too. I agreed, but with one condition that I made very clear. "This is not a sleepover kind of date, Jareth." "Of course," he said. "No pressure. Just food and a movie. I'll be on my best behavior." I texted my roommate the address before heading over. Jareth lived about 30 minutes outside the city in a quiet, suburban neighborhood with wide lawns and trimmed hedges. His house looked like something from a home renovation show: charcoal siding, white trim, and large windows. I parked in his driveway, texted him that I was there, and waited. No answer. I waited for another minute. Still nothing. My phone buzzed. A text. "Hey, in the back bedroom. Just let yourself in, it's open. Follow my voice." Something about that didn't sit right with me. I hesitated. What if I had the wrong house? What if someone else was inside? But I double-checked the address, and it matched. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The house was quiet. Clean. A little too clean. The kind of clean that feels staged, like a model home. I called out, "Jareth?" "Back here," he called. "Just follow my voice." I followed the sound down a hallway that opened into a large, bright bedroom. And then I froze. Lined up on the bed, on the dresser, on the floor were guns. Dozens of them. Neatly arranged, some opened up in pieces, others fully assembled. I counted at least 25. Some looked like military-grade weapons, others handguns. And Jareth, in the middle of all of this, shirtless and polishing what looked like a semi-automatic rifle with a scope attached. He looked up casually. "Hey, how's it going?" I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened. Something told me not to run, not to panic. I forced a chuckle. You weren't kidding about being in law enforcement." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just doing some inventory. Had a shipment come in. Gotta keep track." I nodded slowly, trying to process the scene. "Are they all loaded?" He shrugged. "Some. You never know when something might pop off. Gotta stay ready." There was a long silence between us. I didn't want to ask the next question, but I had to. "Is there somewhere else we can hang out? Maybe the living room? Just for the movie?" His face changed. Just slightly, but enough. A flicker of irritation. A tightening of the jaw. "I asked you on our first date how you felt about guns," he said calmly. "You said you didn't have a problem." "I don't," I said quickly. "I just wasn't expecting this many. And we're still getting to know each other. I think I'd just feel more comfortable if we..." He cut me off by setting down the rifle with a little too much force. "Why is it always the same thing?" he said, voice low. "Women always think they're the victim, always assuming the worst. If I wanted to hurt you, Jailani, I wouldn't need a gun." The room shrank. My body tensed so hard I couldn't feel my fingertips. I was suddenly aware of every single one of the weapons surrounding me. I felt like I was in a trap, the kind of trap that doesn't look like one until it's too late. I swallowed hard, keeping my tone light. "That's not what I meant. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'd really like to watch the movie. That's all. Can we do that?" He stared at me for a beat longer than necessary, then nodded slowly. "Sure," he said. "Let's go to the living room." I turned, trying not to move too fast, trying not to breathe too loudly. We walked together toward the front room, and the moment I crossed the threshold into the living room, I felt like I could finally breathe. He turned on the TV, picked a generic action movie, and sat beside me. I didn't sit. I stood awkwardly near the door. I actually forgot I had to take care of something tonight," I said. "I'm so sorry. I should have canceled earlier." He looked at me like I'd kicked his dog. Are you serious? Yeah. I really didn't plan this very well. I'll make it up to you. I didn't wait for his response. I walked to the door, trying to move casually. He followed. When I stepped outside, he followed me all the way to my car. And in his hand, he was carrying one of the guns, resting it on his shoulder like it was nothing. You can bring yours next time, he said with a cold grin. That way we're even. I didn't respond. I got in the car and locked the doors. He stood there, watching me, the barrel of the weapon pointed toward the sky. I backed out and drove off without looking back. I didn't even exhale until I was halfway down the street. That night, I blocked his number. I texted my roommate that I was okay. And then I sat on the couch and cried, not because anything happened, but because I knew how close it had come. To this day, I don't know if he meant to scare me or if he thought it was all a harmless display. Dating in a polarized country is like walking through a minefield with a match in your hand. You can try to ignore the stakes, pretend you're just there for drinks and maybe a kiss. But some beliefs aren't just opinions, they're deal breakers. His name was Ethan. Clean image. Sharp jawline. Books to bars. Political junkie. Let's argue respectfully. I was instantly intrigued by this statement. I'd been on a string of dates with men who either had no opinions or were terrified to share them. Ethan felt refreshing. Confident. Smart. A little provocative, but in a way that felt like a challenge, not a warning. We matched, and the messages flowed easily. We talked about books. He was reading The Fire Next Time, podcasts, he loved Ezra Klein, and films, he adored documentaries, especially ones about corruption and power. He mentioned he'd worked on a congressional campaign in college. I told him I used to intern at a nonprofit that focused on voting rights. I feel like we'd have a lot to talk about, he wrote. We agreed to meet at a wine bar the following Friday. He was already seated when I arrived. Black button-down, sleeves rolled, one leg crossed over the other with the ease of someone who knows he looks good. He stood up when I walked in. Emery, he said, smiling. You're even cuter offline. I blushed, surprised by how warm he seemed. We ordered drinks. He got a red blend. I chose a Tempranillo. The conversation started light, music, favorite cities, mutual hatred of small talk, and then dipped into politics like water finding its depth. At first, it was electric. We agreed on a lot. Climate change is real, billionaires should pay higher taxes, healthcare is a human right. He spoke with conviction, but not arrogance. He listened when I talked. He asked smart questions. We even joked about how rare it was to find someone who wasn't afraid to get a little ideological on a first date. Then came the moment that split the night in two. We were talking about protests, specifically the ones that had taken over the city the year before. I said casually, I went to 3 of them. The energy was so powerful. I felt like I was finally part of something. Ethan smiled. I didn't go to any. I don't really believe in street protest. I tilted my head. Why not? It's performative, he said. All that screaming and marching, it doesn't change anything. It just makes people feel righteous. I blinked. That's a pretty cynical take. Real change happens in boardrooms, he continued, sipping his wine. In strategy, not in the streets. I swallowed hard. But protests are strategy, I said. They raise awareness. They shift public sentiment. They've shaped history. He shrugged. Maybe 50 years ago. But now it's just a bunch of people yelling into the void and blocking traffic. I laughed nervously. You sound like my uncle. He grinned. Maybe your uncle's right. I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. But something had cracked. From there, we started to argue, softly at first, then with growing intensity. He said cancel culture was a liberal tantrum. I said accountability wasn't the same as censorship. He said the media was obsessed with race. I said the media was finally catching up to reality. He said identity politics had ruined the left. I said identity wasn't a distraction, it was the whole damn point. We weren't shouting, but we were no longer flirting. At one point, I asked, did you vote in the last local election? He hesitated. I don't vote in local races. They're mostly symbolic. I stared at him. You're kidding. No, he said. They don't matter. It's all noise. I set my glass down. You said you were a political junkie. I am, he said. Just not in the way that makes me stand in line to cast votes that don't change anything. I leaned back, stunned. He saw the look on my face and smiled. What? You're not one of those, every vote counts people, are you? I'm a black woman in America, I said. So yeah, I am. That shut him up briefly. Then he said, I think you're overreacting. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that rises when your body knows a situation is unsalvageable. I think we're done here, I said, standing up. He looked shocked. Seriously? You're not who I thought you were, I said. And that's fine, but I don't argue human rights over Merlot. He scoffed. Wow, dramatic. I didn't respond. I left without finishing my wine. That night, I told my roommate Eleanor everything. She listened wide-eyed. He said, "What?" "Everything," I said. He went full contrarian. She shook her head. Why do men think being logical is a personality? We laughed. But later, alone in my room, I didn't feel like laughing. I felt disappointed, because I'd really believed we had something. We liked the same books, listened to the same podcasts, said the same buzzwords. But underneath the surface, our values were galaxies apart, and I'd ignored the early signs. Like when he said, "I don't believe in labels." Or when he said, "I think people are too sensitive these days." Or when he asked, "Do you ever get tired of talking about race?" I'd heard those phrases before. I just didn't expect to hear them from someone who quoted James Baldwin. But that's the thing. Anyone can mimic the language of progress. Not everyone lives it, and some people wield it like a disguise. I unmatched him the next day. He messaged me on Instagram a week later. "Hey, sorry if I came off too strong. I actually liked you. Think we could try again?" I didn't reply, because I don't argue about my humanity over drinks. I don't date people who treat my existence like a debate. This happened 2 years ago, when I was living in Charlotte and working as a graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I had just gotten out of a long, codependent relationship, and I was in that phase where dating felt more like entertainment than pursuit. I wanted light conversations, good food, and maybe a few stories to laugh about later. That's how I met Cass Sir. Our first date was at a quiet sushi spot. He showed up early, held the door for me, and complimented my earrings. He was soft-spoken, attentive, asked about my family without prying too much. He didn't talk about himself often, but when he did, he kept things vague. "I travel a lot for work," he said. "Sometimes I'm gone for weeks." "What kind of consulting do you do?" I asked. He smiled. "High-pressure logistics. Mostly government contracts." That sounded impressive. I didn't press. Over the next few weeks, we went on 3 more dates. Nothing serious, just casual dinners, walks, the occasional late-night text. He never pushed for more. Never made me feel uncomfortable. If anything, he seemed almost too reserved. Then one Thursday night, he canceled a date last minute. "Hey, something came up. Need to reschedule. I'll text you soon." I didn't think much of it. That weekend, I didn't hear from him. On Sunday, I sent a quick "hope everything's okay" text. He responded with a photo of a sunset and a message. "Just clearing my head. Work stuff. Talk soon." Again, I didn't pry. We weren't exclusive. I had no claim over his time. But the following week, Charlotte was buzzing with news. A man had been killed just outside Raleigh, shot in a supposed self-defense situation. The shooter claimed the victim had tried to rob him, and he had no choice but to pull the trigger. The story made local headlines because of the shooter's background. No criminal record, clean-cut, former military. His name was never mentioned in the early reports, but the timeline made me pause. The shooting happened on Thursday night. The same night Cass Sir canceled our date. I laughed at myself at first. I was being paranoid. I wanted a story where there wasn't one. But then I looked at the photo he'd sent me of the sunset. I zoomed in. The timestamp said 7:42 p.m. The news report said the shooting occurred at 7:35. I felt my stomach twist. I sent the photo to my friend Clara. "Am I losing my mind?" I asked. She stared at it for a long time. Where was he that night? He never said. "You need to ask him." So I did. I waited 2 days, then sent a casual text. "Hey, just wondering, where were you last Thursday again? Still thinking about that sunset pic." He didn't respond for hours. Then, "Just east of Raleigh. Long day." "Why?" I replied. "Just curious. There was some crazy story on the news around that area. Made me think of you." No response. The next day, Clara sent me an article update. This one included the shooter's name. Cass Sir M. Caldwell. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I reread it. Then again. It was him. The man who had sent me a photo of the sky minutes after killing someone. I called Clara. "He did it," I said. "He really did it." What are you going to do? I don't know. Part of me wanted to report what I knew. But what did I really know? That he'd canceled plans and sent me a scenic photo? That he'd matched a name in a news article? There was no law against dating someone who'd killed a man in self-defense. The police weren't looking for witnesses. The case was already under review. But emotionally, psychologically, I didn't know how to process it. I kept thinking back to our last date. How calm he was. How he laughed at a joke I made about never trusting consultants. How he tilted his head when I talked, like he was studying me. What else hadn't he said? Why did he seem so practiced in his silences? I stopped responding to his messages after that. They were infrequent, but still came. Thinking of you. Hope your week's going well. Would love to see you again. I never replied. Eventually they stopped. But the feeling didn't. I started locking my door twice. Started walking faster in parking garages. Started wondering if he would come back, not because he cared, but because he might feel entitled. I told myself I was being dramatic, until I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a folded piece of paper inside. It said, "No hard feelings. I hope you remember me well." That was it. No signature. No ink smudges. No threats. Just a farewell. I reported it to the police. They said unless he'd made a direct threat, there was nothing they could do. I changed my number anyway. It's been over a year since I last heard from him. He wasn't charged. The DA ruled it self-defense. The man he shot had a record. The weapon was legally owned. The story was clean. But I still think about it. About the way he looked at me. About the night he canceled our date. About the photo of the sky. I think about how many other people are out there, smiling calmly, hiding violence in their past like a folded letter in a drawer. And I think about how close I came to becoming a footnote in a very different story. Because the truth is, you don't always know who you're dating. Not until it's too late. Not until you see their name in a headline. Not until they send you a goodbye you didn't ask for. If I could go back, I'd still say yes to the first date. Because he didn't seem dangerous. Because sometimes danger wears cologne and pulls out your chair. But I'd ask more questions. I'd listen harder when the answers didn't come. And I'd trust that quiet voice inside me that said, something's off. Because it was. And I survived it. But not everyone does. This story is about my best friend, Cami, and how she almost got pulled under by someone who said all the right things at exactly the wrong time. Cami had just gotten out of a long-term relationship with a man who had drained her emotionally and financially. She was finally starting to find herself again, going to therapy, journaling, rebuilding her confidence. I was proud of her. She was grounded, cautious, and clear about what she wanted. So when she told me she was ready to try dating again, I was cautiously optimistic. She downloaded an app, set some boundaries, and promised to keep me updated. That's how she met Cashin. He was her first match on there. I don't know, she said, showing me her phone. He seems refreshingly normal. They matched. They messaged. And almost immediately he asked for her number. I usually don't give it out that fast, she said, but something about him feels safe. That was day 1. By day 2, they were texting constantly. By day 3, he sent flowers to her office. By day 4, he told her she was the most emotionally intelligent woman he'd ever met. By day 5, they were on their first date. Cami said it was perfect. Dinner at a quiet bistro, soft jazz playing, Cashin listening with his whole body. He asked thoughtful questions, remembered small details, and didn't even try to kiss her at the end. He said he wanted to take things slow, she told me, beaming. I wanted to be happy for her, I did. But something about the pacing made my stomach twist. Just keep your eyes open, I said gently. Sometimes love bombing looks a lot like romance. She waved me off. He's just sincere. I asked for someone emotionally available, and I got it. I didn't argue. She deserved to enjoy this. But over the next week, things escalated. Cashin started texting her all day, every day. Good morning, beautiful. Thinking of you. What are you doing now? Wish I could hold you. Miss you so much. At first, Cami basked in the attention. After years of being ignored or dismissed, it felt intoxicating to be wanted so completely. But then the tone shifted. If she didn't reply right away, he'd send follow-ups. You okay? Hello? Did I do something wrong? If she said she was busy with work, he'd pout over text. I just can't stop thinking about you. Wish you prioritized me the way I do you. When she went out with friends, he'd guilt trip her. Hope you're having fun without me. It's hard not being your first choice. The messages started to feel less like affection and more like surveillance. I told her, "This feels controlling, Cammy." She shook her head. "He's just expressive. He said his love language is words of affirmation. But is your love language being overwhelmed?" She didn't answer. Then came the turning point. One night, she called me in tears. "He showed up," she whispered. "Where?" "My apartment." Cammy hadn't invited him over. They hadn't even exchanged addresses. But somehow he found her place. I was walking up the stairs, and there he was, standing by my door with takeout. What did he say? That he missed me. That he figured out where I lived based on clues I'd given him. He said it was romantic. I felt my blood run cold. "That's not romantic, Cammy. That's stalking." She hesitated. I know. But he looked so sad. Like, he didn't mean to cross a line. I begged her to cut it off. She said she would. But Cashin didn't take rejection well. When she told him she needed space, he bombarded her with voice notes. Some pleading, some angry, all unhinged. He said she was abandoning him. He accused her of using him for attention. He said she was just like the others. Then he started messaging her friends, me included. I received a DM from an account with no profile photo, just a message. "You're the reason she's pulling away." I blocked it. So did she. But the messages kept coming, from new numbers, new usernames. Eventually, I convinced her to run a background check. What we found made my stomach flip. Cashin had been arrested twice for harassment. Once in his 20s, once just 2 years ago. Both charges were dropped, but the reports were chilling. In one case, he had followed a woman across state lines after she blocked him. In another, he had threatened to ruin her reputation if she didn't respond to his messages. When we confronted him, he denied everything. Said the reports were fake. Said his exes were vindictive. Said we were tearing down a good man for no reason. Cammy finally went no contact. She changed her number. She updated her locks. She started therapy again. It took weeks for the messages to stop. Months for her to sleep through the night. And even now, years later, she still checks the back seat of her car before getting in. What scares me most isn't just what happened. It's how fast it happened. 5 days. That's all it took. And the worst part, if you'd met Cashin on the first day, you would have thought he was perfect. Because love bombing wears a nice suit. It brings flowers. It says all the right things. Until you miss a text. Until you say no. Until you ask for space. And then, it shows you who it really is. I share this story because people need to know that danger doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers compliments. Sometimes it sends good morning texts. Sometimes it shows up with dinner. And sometimes it finds your address without permission. If you feel overwhelmed in the early days, listen to that feeling. If someone loves you too fast, ask why. If their interest feels like pressure, it probably is. And if your best friend says something feels off, trust her. Because 5 days can change everything. And no one deserves to confuse obsession for love. There's a certain type of man who doesn't fall apart when you reject him. He detonates. This is a story about one of those men. His name was Ezekiel King, but he went by Jerome. And when I met him, he was everything I thought I wanted. Attentive, charming, successful. It started on Hinge, where else right? Looking for something real. I don't chase, I build. I should have known. We matched, and he messaged me within 30 minutes. "Elora, that's poetry. What's your story?" We chatted for a few days. He had a polished way of speaking, like someone who'd watched too many TED Talks but still somehow made it feel personal. He said he ran a small consulting firm and had just moved back to the city after a stint in Austin. He asked if I wanted to meet for drinks. I agreed. Our first date was at a cozy wine lounge. He ordered a bottle without asking what I liked, but I didn't mind. He talked about his business, his family, his failed engagement 3 years ago. I listened, flattered by how quickly he opened up. He made me feel like I mattered. He texted afterward. "You're rare. I felt calm around you. That never happens." We went on 3 more dates in the next 2 weeks. Dinners, walks, late-night phone calls. It escalated quickly, but not in a way I found alarming. He said he liked consistency, that he was tired of casual flings, that he wanted presence, not potential. Then one evening, he sent me a voice note. "I miss you." It was tender, breathless even. I listened to it twice, but I didn't reply right away. I was at work, overwhelmed, and unsure how to respond. It felt a little too fast. I liked him, but miss was a word that carried weight. I didn't want to say it back just to make him feel better. I waited 6 hours before texting. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm still figuring out how I feel, and I want to be honest. I hit send, and that's when everything changed. The next message came an hour later. Wow, I knew it. You're just like the rest. I blinked. Then, you love the attention, but you don't want to give anything back. I didn't reply. He kept going. You're emotionally unavailable. Another broken woman pretending to be deep. Then, you'll never find someone like me again. You just lost your shot. I blocked the number. But 2 hours later, I got a message from a new number. Blocking me proves my point. Coward. Then another. You think you're special? You're a basic chick in a Zara dress. Then came the photos. Screenshots of our earlier conversations. Selfies I'd sent. Then a video of himself, shirtless, in bed with another woman. He looked into the camera and said, "This is what a real woman looks like when she knows how to appreciate me." I felt my stomach drop. I called my cousin Esther, who's an attorney. She listened as I read the messages aloud. "Document everything," she said. "Every number. Every screenshot. We're going to file a report." I cried that night. Not because I missed him, but because I felt invaded. Because someone I'd only known a few weeks had turned into a digital storm I couldn't escape. He created new numbers daily. He messaged me on WhatsApp, on Signal, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Everywhere I had a profile, he showed up. You think you can ghost me and walk away? You're a manipulative tease. I'll make sure everyone sees who you really are. I stopped sleeping. I checked locks 3 times at night. I deleted my dating apps. I stopped going to my favorite cafe. Because what if he showed up? He knew my neighborhood. He knew where I worked. I had mentioned it casually on our second date, not the name of the company, but the general intersection. That was enough. Esther helped me file a police report. The officer was polite, but skeptical. "Did he threaten you directly?" he asked. "No," I said. "But he's harassing me. Sending explicit content. Using multiple numbers." They nodded, took notes. "We'll document it. But unless he makes a direct threat or shows up physically, there's not much we can do yet." I wanted to scream. So much of what women endure lives in the quiet margins, just outside the lines of what's legally actionable. But it's still harm. It's still fear. It's still trauma. For weeks, I lived in digital lockdown. I changed my passwords. I added 2-factor authentication. I used a VPN. But the messages kept coming. Then one morning, I woke up to a Google review, posted under my full name. Elora F. is a liar and emotional manipulator. She plays innocent, but uses men for attention. Avoid her. No photos. No threats. Just poison wrapped in ambiguity. I reported it. It was taken down 3 days later. But the damage lingered. I kept asking myself, how did I miss it? The red flags? The manipulation? The possessiveness disguised as intensity? But here's the thing about narcissists. They don't start with rage. They start with romance. With compliments that sound like prophecies. With check-ins that feel like care. With attention that masquerades as intimacy. They make you feel chosen before they make you feel trapped. And when you finally say something they don't want to hear, they unravel. Loudly. Publicly. Cruelly. I've read about narcissistic abuse since then. The cycles. The love bombing. The rage. The smear campaigns. Jerome hit every mark. He was a textbook. But when you're in it, you don't see the table of contents. You just see a man who says he misses you. And you want to be kind. So you hesitate. So you explain. So you soften. And in that softness, he sees an opening. I stopped hearing from him about a month later. No explanation. Just silence. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he found someone else to fixate on. Maybe the report scared him. I'll never know. But I still keep a folder on my desktop labeled Jerome Evidence. Just in case. And I still flinch when a new number texts me. Just in case. But I'm healing. I'm dating again, slowly, cautiously. I'm learning to trust my instincts again. To honor discomfort. To believe myself the first time. And to never confuse intensity with intimacy again. Jerome didn't take anything from me I can't reclaim. But he left an imprint. And I'm not ashamed of that. Because survival stories aren't just about escape. They're about recognition. And now I recognize the signs. And I want others to as well. So if you're reading this and someone's love feels like pressure, if their attention feels like surveillance, if saying, "I need space," turns warmth into venom, run. Report. It had been a dry spell. A long one. I wasn't desperate, but I was definitely curious. So I reinstalled Hinge and promised myself I'd give people a real chance. No shallow rejections. No ghosting. Just honest effort. That's how I matched with Eden. She asked me many questions like, do you believe in reincarnation? What emotions do you carry in your chest most often? Do you ever feel like your body isn't your true form? I wasn't sure how to answer half the time, but I appreciated her depth. She seemed genuine. Finally, she said, let's meet. I don't do bars. Too much stagnant energy. How about the Arboretum? Sunday at 2. I agreed. Public place. Daylight. Nature. What could go wrong? Sunday arrived. I wore jeans, a soft t-shirt, and brought a water bottle. Classic date in the park attire. I got there early and sat on a bench near the pond. At 2:07 p.m., I saw her. Eden. She was wearing a long, flowing linen dress in an indeterminate earth tone. Her hair was in loose braids, and her eyes were hidden behind oversized round sunglasses. And draped casually around her neck was a snake. A real, live, muscular, coiling boa constrictor. I froze. She walked up like this was normal. Elias, she said, her voice soft and melodic. Yeah, I managed. She extended a hand. The snake shifted. This is Esmeralda, she said, gesturing to the snake. She's my emotional support animal. I blinked. She's very calm. She knows your energy is safe. I sat there, stunned, as the snake's body shifted across her shoulders like a moving scarf. She sat down beside me, the snake's tail dangling near my forearm. I tried not to flinch. Do you mind if she sits with us? Eden asked. I smiled, instinctively. The way you smile when you're trying not to upset someone who clearly lives by different rules. Sure. As long as she doesn't, constrict anything. Eden laughed. She only does that when she feels unsafe. You're fine. I can tell. I nodded slowly. We talked for a bit, mostly about her spiritual journey. Eden told me she'd lived in Peru for 6 months to reconnect with ancestral rhythms. That she'd once fasted for 3 days in the desert to dislodge inherited trauma. That Esmeralda had been gifted to her in a dream and manifested into her life through synchronicity. At one point, she took out a tiny vial of oil and dabbed it onto her wrists. It's a grounding blend, she explained. Cedar, vetiver, and snake musk. Snake musk? From Esmeralda, harvested during her last shed. I nodded again, too stunned to respond. Meanwhile, Esmeralda had begun slowly inching her way across the back of the bench, her tongue flicking out with sudden interest. Maybe at a nearby squirrel. Maybe at me. Who's to say? I tried to keep the conversation going. So, what do you do for work? I'm a vibrational therapist, Eden said. I help people recalibrate their internal frequencies. Oh, I said. Do you have like a practice? No, she said. I work from wherever the energy is open. Of course. I glanced at my watch. We'd been there for 35 minutes. Eden leaned closer. I have to say your aura is very stable. That's rare these days. Thanks, I said. I drink a lot of water. She laughed again, genuinely. Then she asked, would you like to hold Esmeralda? I froze. I don't think I'm ready for that. She won't hurt you, she said. She only tightens when she senses resistance. Exactly, I said. Eden looked disappointed. She's part of me, Elias. If you're not open to her, are you open to me? I paused, genuinely unsure how to respond. I'm just not used to snakes, I said. I didn't grow up around them. She nodded solemnly. Fear is a teacher. Then she reached into her woven satchel and pulled out a small tattered book. I'd like to read something to you, she said. Before I could answer, she began. The snake is not an enemy but a mirror. To touch her is to touch your own shadow. To fear her is to fear your own transformation. I nodded slowly, trying not to scream internally. Then Esmeralda began to move, slithering down her arm and onto her lap. Eden looked delighted. She likes you. I stood up. I think I need to use the restroom, I said. There's a composting toilet near the Magnolia Grove, she offered, like that was a normal thing to say. Thanks, I said. I'll find it. I walked briskly away, heart pounding. When I was out of view, I texted my roommate Elliot. Emergency. Come to the Arboretum. I'm on a date with a woman who brought a snake. He replied instantly. WTF? A 6-foot boa constrictor. Emotional support animal. On my way. 10 minutes later, I spotted Elliot jogging toward me through the trees. What the hell, man, he said. She's nice, but it's too much. Where is she now? Still on the bench. Reading snake poetry, probably. We walked back together. Eden saw Elliot and stood up, Esmeralda now coiled gently around her waist. "This is my friend," I said. "He had a situation. I need to help him out." Eden nodded. "I understand. Energy is always shifting." "Thanks for meeting me," I said. "You're definitely one of a kind." She smiled. Esmeralda says goodbye. I waved awkwardly at the snake. It flicked its tongue in what I can only assume was disapproval. We walked away quickly. Elliot didn't say anything for a full minute. Then, "I don't even have a joke for that." "I do," I said. "I dated a woman who asked me to embrace my inner serpent. I declined." He laughed. "That night, I got a message from Eden. I felt a disconnect in your root chakra. Perhaps next time, you'll be ready to surrender." I didn't reply. I unmatched her the next day. But I didn't block her. I wasn't afraid of her. She wasn't dangerous. Just deeply immersed in a world I didn't belong to. And I don't share this to mock her. She was sincere. But sincerity doesn't make something sustainable. And not every connection is meant to be followed. Some are meant to be observed, felt, and released like a snake shedding skin. There's a difference between a red flag and a red siren. I didn't know that until the night a man pretended to be deaf to get sympathy, and then forgot halfway through dinner. Let me walk you through it. We met on Hinge. His name was Yosef, mid-30s. His pictures were artistic. His bio read something I had not seen before on a dating app. Deaf, fluent in ASL, looking for someone who listens in more ways than one. I paused. I'd never dated someone who was deaf, but I'd studied basic ASL in college. I remembered the alphabet and a few phrases. I was intrigued. I liked that he was direct. I liked that he framed his identity with pride. I swiped right. He messaged first. "Hi, smiley face." I read lips. "Hope that's okay." I replied, "Absolutely. I know a little ASL too." He responded with a gif of someone signing, "Awesome." We messaged for a few days, short, sweet, mostly typed. He told me he worked in design, loved vintage cameras, and preferred quiet cafes to noisy bars. He said he lost most of his hearing in early adolescence due to a viral infection. I asked if he used hearing aids. He said, "Sometimes, but mostly I just adapt." He seemed funny, gentle, thoughtful. I liked him. We made plans to meet at a small Mediterranean place downtown. Quiet, cozy, low lighting, his suggestion. I arrived first, nervous but optimistic. Yosef walked in 5 minutes later, wearing a dark sweater and a soft smile. He waved, then touched his chest, a small ASL sign for me. I smiled and signed, "Hi, Yara," with my fingers. He grinned and gave a thumbs up. So far, so good. We sat. He pointed to the menu and mouthed, "You choose." I nodded and ordered for both of us, lamb kebabs and a shared mezzi platter. The first 20 minutes were nice. A little awkward, but sweet. We typed short messages on our phones and showed them to each other. Occasionally, he'd mouth a word, and I'd try to follow his lips. Every so often, he'd sign something I didn't understand, then laugh silently at my puzzled expression. It felt quirky, different. I was adjusting. Then, somewhere between the Baba Ganesh and the second glass of wine, it happened. I asked him aloud without thinking, "So what kind of design do you do?" And without hesitation, Yosef said, out loud, clearly, "Oh, mostly UI/UX, but I used to do print layouts for small presses." I stared at him. He blinked. Then his face changed, like he'd just realized what he'd done. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared. He looked down, flustered. Then he laughed nervously. "Wow," he said. "That came out louder than I meant." Still, I said nothing, because I was trying to piece it together. This man had spent the last hour pretending he couldn't speak, pretending he could only lip read, pretending ASL was his primary language. And just like that, he slipped. He spoke like someone who'd never had to think twice about volume or clarity. He spoke like someone who could hear perfectly well. I finally said, "What's going on?" He hesitated. Then he said, "Okay, look, I don't really know how to explain this. I'm not deaf exactly. I have some hearing loss. Like partial. It depends on the day." "Yosef," I said, my voice low. "You told me you were deaf." "I am. Kind of. It's complicated." "No," I said. "It's not." He sighed and rubbed his forehead. I get treated better when people think I'm vulnerable." I stared at him, stunned. He continued, "Women are more patient. More warm. I don't know. People are nicer. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You faked a disability to get sympathy? No. I mean, not exactly. I do have some hearing issues. But you spoke. Clearly. Without thinking. That wasn't a mistake. That was habit. He didn't answer. I stood up. I'm leaving. Wait, he said. Please. Don't make this weird. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You already did. I walked out, heart pounding, stomach turning. I didn't look back. When I got outside, I called Yasmin, my best friend and moral compass. She picked up on the first ring. How's the date? He faked being deaf. Pause. What? Yeah. He lip-read. Signed. Typed everything. Then casually answered a question, out loud. You've got to be kidding me. I wish I was. We sat in silence on the phone for a few seconds. Then Yasmin said, That's not just weird. That's sick. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Like ableist cosplay. Weaponizing people's sympathy. I went home and blocked him. But he messaged me from a different number the next day. Can we talk? I didn't mean to upset you. I just wanted to connect. People treat me like a joke when I'm just myself. I didn't reply. He messaged again 3 hours later. You're not perfect either. You were naive enough to fall for it. I blocked that number too. Then I sat alone in my apartment, feeling nauseated. Not because I felt fooled, but because I felt complicit. Because I hadn't trusted my instincts. Because I'd played along with something that didn't feel quite right. I kept replaying little moments. The fact that he never signed full sentences. That he signaled for me to order for him, even though he could read the menu. That he laughed too quickly when I made a joke. That his timing was always just a bit too precise for someone lip-reading. I told myself I was being harsh, but I wasn't. I'd been manipulated, and I wasn't the only one. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just one bad date. It was a pattern. A man who saw empathy as a shortcut to intimacy. Who used fake vulnerability to fast-track connection. Who thought pretending to be disabled would make him more lovable. And that's not just unethical, it's predatory. I posted about it anonymously in a dating forum. The responses flooded in. One woman said he'd done the same to her, but claimed to be blind instead. Another said he used a wheelchair on their first date, then stood up to adjust a chair and laughed it off. He was doing this to multiple women, telling different stories, wearing different masks. Each time, looking for someone who wouldn't question the script. I contacted the dating app. I sent screenshots, messages, everything. They removed his profile within 24 hours. It wasn't justice, but it was something, and I never heard from him again. Still, I think about it sometimes. About how far people will go to avoid being real. About how manipulative someone can be while still smiling. About how disability isn't a costume you wear to get attention. It's something people live with, grapple with, every single day. And to perform it for sympathy? That's not just deceit. It's theft. It steals trust. It steals dignity. It steals space from people who actually live that reality. So I'm sharing this now for anyone who's ever ignored a strange feeling on a date. I've always been careful online. No last names on dating apps. No personal details in captions. My Instagram is private, my Facebook is locked down, and my phone number never goes out until I absolutely trust someone. But none of that mattered when Adler found me. And to this day, I still don't know exactly how he did it. Let me start from the beginning. It was mid-September, and I'd just re-downloaded Bumble after a 6-month hiatus. Adler was one of the first people I matched with. I wasn't much of a hiker, but I appreciated the enthusiasm on his page. We matched, and I messaged to begin with. Define a little lost. He replied, just far enough to find something better than what we planned. He was charming, quirky even. We chatted for about 3 days, mostly about travel, music, and his favorite trails around the area. But early on I noticed a pattern. He kept pushing to meet in secluded areas. First it was a sunrise hike at a park 30 minutes outside the city. Then it was a scenic drive to a lookout point. Then, when I hesitated, he said, "You're too uptight. What's the worst that could happen?" That rubbed me the wrong way. I replied, "I prefer public places for first meetings. It's not personal." He didn't respond for 6 hours. Then, "I'm not here to be treated like I'm dangerous. If you can't trust me, we're wasting time." I unmatched him. It didn't feel like a dramatic decision. I'd had dozens of conversations that fizzled for lesser reasons. I blocked his profile and moved on. But exactly 5 days later, I got a Facebook friend request. from a profile named Adler J. I stared at it for a long time. We had no mutual friends, no groups in common, and most importantly, I had never given him my last name. My Bumble profile used only my first name, Amina. My Facebook profile didn't include my face in the profile photo, just a photo of a succulent near a window. So how did he find me? I clicked on his profile. It was nearly empty. One profile picture, no visible friends, and a banner image of a mountain range. I didn't accept the request. Instead, I blocked the account immediately. 3 hours later, I got a follow request on Instagram. Same username at AdlerJ Adventures. No profile picture. 0 followers. Following one account, mine. I hadn't posted anything new in weeks. My profile was private. My bio just said, coffee plus books plus late walks. Waxing crescent moon. I blocked that account too. Then I called my cousin Avery. She's the kind of person who uses burner email addresses for retail signups and runs background checks on her own dates, just in case. I knew she'd know what to do. Avery, I said, I think someone reverse searched my photos. What do you mean? I explained everything, Bumble, the pushy messages, the unmatch, the sudden Facebook and Instagram requests. She was quiet for a minute. Do you use the same photo for your dating profile and any of your public platforms? I paused. I think I used a cropped version of my old LinkedIn headshot. That's it, she said. Reverse image search. He probably dragged your photo into Google and found your LinkedIn, then your full name, then your socials. I felt nauseated. But my LinkedIn is private. Private-ish, she countered. Your profile picture still shows up in search results. And once he had your full name, your Facebook and Instagram weren't hard to find, even if they were locked down. The metadata trails are messy. I sat on my bed, stunned. I didn't even tell him where I worked. He didn't need you to, she said. He just needed one reusable photo. That night, I did a full audit of my online presence. I changed profile photos, updated privacy settings, scrubbed metadata from old albums. Then I reported both accounts, Facebook and Instagram, for harassment. Neither platform responded with urgency. Instagram sent back a generic message. This account does not appear to violate our community guidelines. Facebook said, we've reviewed the profile you reported. It does not violate our policies. He hadn't messaged me. He hadn't threatened me. So to them, he hadn't done anything wrong. But I knew better. This wasn't coincidence. This was targeted. A man I'd spoken to for 3 days had gone out of his way to find me across platforms, using only a photo and a first name. That's not persistence. That's a violation. I spent the next week on edge. I turned off location services. I stopped posting. I even stopped answering unknown calls, something I used to find silly but now felt essential. I kept wondering, if he could find me once, what else could he find? What if he showed up at my job? What if he figured out where I lived? Avery offered to run a full search on him. He's not just some guy, she said. People don't do this unless they've done it before. She found his last name quickly, Adler Jameson. A former college athlete. A few public posts about hiking. One tagged photo from 2021 with a woman whose face was blurred. But no criminal record. No obvious red flags. Just the same curated image he showed me. I sat with that for a long time. Because here's the thing, he didn't have to be a criminal to scare me. He just had to ignore my boundaries. He just had to feel entitled to access I didn't give him. And he did. He felt entitled to find me. To follow me. To insert himself into places I had never invited him. That's not romance. That's control. I filed a formal report with Bumble, detailing everything, including the social media accounts that followed. To their credit, they responded quickly. We take this seriously and have permanently removed the user from our platform. That gave me a small sense of relief. But it didn't undo what happened. It didn't take back the anxiety. It didn't change the way I now approach every online interaction, with suspicion instead of curiosity. And I hate that. I hate that someone else's behavior forced me to shrink my digital space, to hide more, to trust less. But I also know I'm not alone. Since then, I've heard similar stories from other women. One had a man find her Spotify by searching her Bumble anthem and username. Another had a guy find her Venmo and send her money to get her attention. Another had a match show up at her yoga class because she once mentioned the name of the studio in passing. These aren't accidents. They're violations. They're warnings dressed up as attention. And they're happening more often than people think. So if you're reading this and you've ever had a weird feeling after blocking someone, trust it. If someone finds you after you unmatch them, report it. If someone uses the smallest details to inject themselves into your life, cut them off. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. You don't owe anyone a further explanation. You don't have to wait until it gets worse to call it what it is. Stalking. I still don't know what Adler wanted. Closure? Control? Just the satisfaction of finding me? But I do know what I wanted, to be left alone. And now finally I am. But I'll never forget how fast it happened. How quickly a casual chat became a calculated intrusion. How one photo became a roadmap. And how someone I never even met in person made me afraid to be visible online. Some dates go badly because of awkward silence, bad breath, or a mutual lack of chemistry. Others go badly because you realize, too late, that you're not on a date. You're in someone else's plan. This is about the night I got trapped in Alex's apartment for exactly 1 hour and 24 minutes. And how that hour changed the way I date forever. It started, as these stories often do, with a dating app. Nothing fancy, just a standard profile on Coffee Meets Bagel. Alex's profile stood out. Not because he was the most attractive guy on the app, though he was handsome in a very curated, Instagram-filtered kind of way, but because of how confidently he wrote. I don't chase. I attract. If you're the kind of woman who knows her worth, we'll get along just fine. I rolled my eyes at the first sentence, but was intrigued enough to scroll further. His photos were sleek, one in a fitted suit, another on a rooftop bar, and one with a dog that I later realized wasn't his. Still, I liked that he had a sense of style and seemed articulate. I swiped right. He messaged me within minutes. Ariel. Rare name. Are you as rare in personality? I laughed. Bold start. We began talking, and I noticed a pattern. Alec didn't ask questions so much as make declarations. Sounds like you're someone who's been underestimated. You strike me as the kind of woman who doesn't let anyone tell her what to do. I bet you're intuitive. In retrospect, it was all calculated. He wasn't getting to know me. He was building a version of me that suited him. And I was flattered enough not to notice. After a week of back and forth, he suggested meeting in person. Let's skip the coffee shop pleasantries, he said. Come over. I'll cook for you. Real food. Real energy. I hesitated. I usually prefer to meet in public first. He replied almost immediately. Understandable. But I'm not interested in surface-level anything. If you're not comfortable, I respect that. But I think you'll regret missing this. It was manipulative, but gently so. I agreed. Before going, I sent my sister Anita the address. I told her to call me at a specific time with a fake emergency if I texted her a single word. Now. She didn't argue. She just said, don't eat anything you didn't see him make. I arrived at Alex's place around 7:15 p.m. It was a high-rise apartment downtown, pristine, modern, and clearly staged for effect. A wall of expensive whiskey bottles. A record player spinning slow jazz. Dim lighting. A single candle flickering between two plates. He opened the door in a black Henley shirt and smiled like we had known each other for years. Right on time, he said. I like that. The first 20 minutes were fine. He handed me a glass of wine, offered bruschetta he said he made himself, and walked me through his vinyl collection like it was a museum. But something felt off. He didn't ask me anything about work, family, my life. He just talked, non-stop, about his exes, about their emotional immaturity, about how women always ruin good men. I nodded politely, trying to keep the energy light. I didn't want to escalate anything, but I also wasn't interested in staying long. Then, about 30 minutes in, he said something that made me freeze. You're not leaving yet, right? He asked, eyes locked on mine. I was planning to head out soon, I said carefully. I have work in the morning. He tilted his head. You just got here. I know, but I didn't plan to stay too late. He got up and casually locked the door. I watched him do it, slowly, like it was nothing. Then he turned back and smiled. I just don't want any surprises. I laughed nervously. That's not funny. I'm not joking, he said, still smiling. I like to control the energy in my space. I reached for my phone. No need to do that, he said. Just sit. Relax. You're safe. I didn't feel safe, but I didn't want to provoke him. So I sat. He poured more wine. I didn't drink it. He talked more. I barely responded. At 8:27 p.m., I texted Anita one word. Now. She called 2 minutes later. I answered and immediately said, Wait, what happened? Then I stood up. I have to go, I said. Family emergency. Alec raised an eyebrow. That's convenient. I'm sorry, I said, already grabbing my coat. He stood in front of the door. Tell me the truth, he said. You're uncomfortable? I paused. Yes, a little. He nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty. Then he stepped aside. But before I could open the door, he said, You'll text me when you get home? I nodded. Of course. I didn't. When I got outside, I walked 2 blocks before calling a rideshare. I didn't want him to know which car was mine. I kept checking behind me the entire ride home. That night, I blocked his number. But the next day, I got a new message on WhatsApp from a number I didn't recognize. You're too reactionary. I was testing your boundaries. You failed. I blocked that too. Then came the email. You're not ready for a man like me. But you will be. I forwarded it to Anita. She said, You need to report him. But report what? That he locked his door and made a weird comment? That he sent a passive-aggressive message? None of it was illegal. Just chilling. I didn't respond to anything. The messages stopped after that. But the fear stayed. I changed my number a week later. Deleted the app. Took a break from dating altogether. For a while, I blamed myself. I shouldn't have gone to his place. I should have insisted on meeting in public. I should have left the moment he started talking about his exes like they were enemies. But here's the truth. Women shouldn't have to be perfect to stay safe. We shouldn't have to analyze every sentence, every tone, every pause. We shouldn't have to run scripts in our heads in case someone decides we owe them more than we're willing to give. Alec didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He didn't grab me. But he locked the door. He made it clear that my comfort didn't matter. And that was enough. Enough to scare me. Enough to change how I date. Enough to remind me that danger doesn't need a weapon. Sometimes, it just needs a smile and a lock. I'm sharing this because someone needs to hear it. If something feels off, it is. If you feel watched instead of seen, leave. It's taken me a long time to talk about this. I recorded this video 3 times, deleted it twice, and cried more than I'd like to admit. If you're here because you've heard about the guy with the 25 guns, this is the follow-up you've been asking for. If you're here to ask, why didn't you just leave? This is especially for you. Let me start by saying, I did leave. I got out of that house. I got in my car. I made it home. But what I've learned since telling that story is that there are 2 kinds of people. Those who understand how fear works, and those who think they'd handle it better. I'm not here to justify myself. I'm here to explain why so many women do what I did, why we stay a few minutes longer, speak a little softer, smile when we're scared, and why that strategy might just save our lives. Let me take you back to the ride home that night. I turned off Jareth Street and kept driving in silence. No music, no podcast, just the sound of my shallow breathing and the occasional click of my blinker. I didn't even cry right away. I was too stunned. My body was locked in this weird combination of adrenaline and disbelief. I kept repeating to myself, You're okay. You're okay. You're okay. Like a spell. When I got home, I texted Jazara. I'm safe. I'll call you in the morning. She immediately called me anyway. Jay, what happened? I hadn't told her everything. Only that I was seeing someone new. That he was in law enforcement. That he had invited me over. I sat on my couch, coat still on, staring at the wall. He had guns. Like, a lot of them. She paused. How many is a lot? 25. Silence. Then, I'm coming over. She showed up 20 minutes later in her leopard print pajamas and a bonnet, holding a bottle of wine like she was ready to burn the whole city down. We sat in silence for a while. Then I told her the whole story. He had one in his hand, I said. And when I asked if we could move rooms, he told me, if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't need a gun. Jazara's face tightened. That's a threat. I shrugged. It didn't feel like one in the moment. It was like he was educating me, explaining how irrational I was being. You weren't irrational, she said. You were responding to a dangerous environment. I just didn't want to provoke him. I could see the fury in her eyes. Not at me, but at the world. Do you know how many women die trying not to provoke someone? She whispered. You played it exactly right. I nodded, but the guilt still sat in my stomach like a stone. The next day, I told the story in a video. I didn't name him. I didn't show his face. I just wanted to share what happened, to remind people that red flags don't always look like screaming or violence. Sometimes they're quiet, sterile, hidden in a clean house and a charming smile. The video went viral within 48 hours. And then the comments started. Why didn't you just leave? You should have called the cops right away. Sounds like you're exaggerating. She probably liked the attention. Some were supportive. Many were not. I shut off my phone for a week. When I finally met with Dr. Junie IA, my longtime therapist, she asked me what I was most afraid of. I guess. I'm afraid it really wasn't that bad. And that I overreacted. She raised an eyebrow. Jailani, she said, let me ask you something. If a man cornered your younger sister in a room full of weapons and told her he didn't need one to hurt her, what would you call that? A threat, I said without hesitation. And if she told you she smiled her way out of it, what would you say? That she was smart. She smiled gently. Exactly. But the thing that stuck with me most wasn't her validation. It was what she said next. There's a name for what you did. It's called fawn response. When we're in danger, we don't just fight or flee. Some of us freeze. Some of us fawn. We appease. We de-escalate. We become small enough to survive. I'd heard of fight or flight. But fawn, that one hit me in the chest. Because looking back, that's exactly what I did. I laughed at his jokes. I softened my voice. I offered to pay him back for the food I never ate. I made myself seem harmless. And it worked. I got out, but not without scars. A week after the video, I got a message from someone claiming to be Jareth's ex-girlfriend. She thanked me. She said she'd been in a relationship with him for almost 2 years, and that it took her nearly 9 months to finally leave. He didn't hit me, she wrote, but he made me feel like I was always one step away from being hurt, like the threat was always just below the surface. She told me he once punched a hole in the wall when she asked him to put away his weapons during dinner. She told me she still checks her locks twice before bed. I read her message 5 times. Then I cried. Again. Because she was the proof I needed. The confirmation I didn't know I was waiting for. It wasn't in my head. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was real. And I wasn't the first. A month later, I was invited to speak on a podcast about women's safety in dating. I hesitated. I didn't want to rehash the trauma. But I also knew how many people were still stuck in situations like mine, feeling crazy, doubting themselves, afraid that no one would believe them unless something terrible happened. So I said yes. The host asked me, what would you say to people who still think you should have left the moment you saw the guns? I took a breath. I would say, I left the moment I could leave safely. And that's the difference. I paused, then added, people think danger always looks like a horror movie. Screaming, blood, broken glass. But sometimes danger is polite. It smiles. It offers you a drink. It doesn't raise its voice. And that makes it harder to name. The episode went live. The messages started pouring in again, this time from women who said, this happened to me too. One woman told me she dated a man who kept a knife under every cushion in his house. Another said her ex would clean his guns in front of her every time they argued. Another shared that she left her boyfriend after he showed her his kill kit and laughed. They all said the same thing. No one believed me. I believed them, because now I knew what it felt like. It's been 6 months since that night at Jareth's house. I haven't seen him since, and I don't plan to. I blocked him on everything. I made a report, not because I thought the police would do anything, but because I wanted there to be a paper trail, just in case. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night and check my locks a 3rd time. But mostly I feel stronger. Stronger for listening to my gut. Stronger for getting out. Stronger for telling the story. I should have known it would end in chaos when she said, I just love your accent. It's so authentic. That's a weird thing to say before you've even sat down. But I was used to it. Being from Yorkshire and dating in London meant I was basically a novelty. A walking stereotype. Northern lad with the funny vowels and a penchant for sarcasm that people mistook for cynicism. Her name was Tamsin. She wore her poshness like perfume, light but lingering. Expensive boots, perfect hair, and a laugh that sounded like it had been trained at Cheltenham Ladies' College. But she was charming. Disarming even. And she'd messaged me first, which always earns bonus points. We agreed to meet at the King's Thistle, a pub in Islington that tried very hard to look rustic, while charging £7.50 for a pint of bitter. I arrived first, ordered a pint of Timothy Taylor's, which they served with hesitation, like they weren't sure it was meant to be cold or flat or both. I didn't care. It tasted like home. Tamsin arrived 5 minutes later in a red wool coat, and that smile people use when they're not sure if they fancy you yet. "Yorick?" she said, like it was a character in a play. "That's me," I said. "Dead in Hamlet, alive in Islington." She laughed. "You really are northern." "Guilty." We talked for a bit, surface stuff. Work, families, the tube strike. She said I sounded like a coal miner reading poetry. I said she sounded like a BBC presenter giving bad news in a cheerful voice. It was going well, until I made a joke about Greg's. She mentioned how much she loved that northern delicacy. "Greg's is sacred where I'm from," I said. "You can't just call it a delicacy, it's a lifestyle." She giggled. "Come on, it's just sausage rolls and sugar. You lot act like it's a religion." I raised an eyebrow. "You lot? I mean northerners. You go on about your oat cakes and your flat caps and whatever else." Now, I knew she was joking, but something in me didn't like the way she said it. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "And you lot down here think a meal deal's a Michelin star if it's from Pret?" Her eyes sparkled. "Touché." That might have been the end of it, but then a man at the next table turned around. Big bloke. Stubbly beard. Shaved head with a tattoo creeping toward his ear. He raised his pint and said, "Oi, you slaggin' off the South?" Tamsin laughed awkwardly. "Not at all. Just playful banter." He pointed at me. "You from Manchester?" "Leeds," I said. He nodded like he'd just confirmed a theory. "Figures." Tamsin tried to change the subject. "We were just joking. No offense meant." He ignored her. "You think it's funny, coming down here, giving it large with your cobbled streets and your chip butters?" I stayed calm. "I think you might be projecting, mate. That was the wrong thing to say." He stood up. "You calling me soft?" "No," I said. "Just southern." Tamsin muttered, "Oh bloody hell." Another man stood up, tall, pale, wearing a rugby shirt. "Leave it, Kev," he said. "It's not worth it." Kev didn't budge. He took a step toward our table. "You northerners think you're salt of the earth. Like you invented hardship. And you lot think London's the center of the universe," I said. "Can't even make eye contact on the tube without getting stabbed by someone's gentrified anxiety." Tamsin put her hand on my arm. "Yorick, maybe let's just go." But I was already standing. Not angry. Just done. "Look," I said, turning to Kev. "I don't care where you're from. But if you're looking for a fight, I'm not your bloke." Kev looked me up and down. Then he said, "You're right." And for a second, I thought it was over. Then he picked up his pint. And threw it. Not at me. At the wall behind me. It shattered. Glass and Guinness everywhere. Panic erupted. Someone screamed. The bartender yelled, "Oi! Out! Out now!" Kev lunged toward me, but the rugby shirt guy grabbed him and pulled him back. Tamsin was already on her feet, coat in hand, face pale. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. We got outside just as the bouncers arrived. She was shaking. "What the hell was that?" "I think we just reignited the North-South rivalry." She looked at me. "You couldn't just let it go." I stared at her. "You started it." Her jaw clenched. "That's not fair." Neither was calling Greg's, just sausage rolls. She laughed, sharp and cold. "God, you really do take yourself seriously." I stepped back, and in that moment, I knew the night was over. Not because of the fight, but because I'd seen it. How quickly a joke becomes a judgment. How fast curiosity turns into condescension. "I think I'll head home," I said. She didn't stop me. Didn't apologize. Didn't even say goodbye. Later that night, I got a text. "Hope your ego's okay. Shame. You were funny before you got defensive." I didn't reply. Because she didn't get it. It wasn't about ego. It was about being tired. Tired of being treated like a punchline. Tired of pretending I didn't notice the smirks when I said bath with a short A. Tired of being someone's cultural excursion. I went home, took off my coat, and poured myself a proper pint from the fridge. And I thought about how something small, a joke, an accent, a pint glass, can unravel everything. All I wanted was a quiet drink and a good conversation. Instead, I got a broken glass, a bruised pride, and a reminder that even in the same country, we're not always speaking the same language. It wasn't the worst date of my life because he was rude. It wasn't the worst because he insulted me or made me feel unsafe. It was the worst because, for the first half hour, I genuinely thought we were connecting. That's what makes this one different. Because when someone's awful from the beginning, your guard goes up. You protect yourself. You can see the trouble coming. But when someone makes you feel seen, really seen, and then flips the script, that's a different kind of hurt. That's betrayal. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown. I was 15 minutes early, which I never am, and he was already there. Smiling. Warm. Wearing a soft gray sweater and sipping something that smelled like cinnamon. He stood up when I walked in. Hugged me. His grip was gentle, but firm, like he wanted to communicate respect. He asked me how my day was. He listened when I answered. He made eye contact. He nodded thoughtfully when I talked about my job at the nonprofit. He said, "You must have a huge heart to do what you do." I smiled. I felt good. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like when someone really shows up. We talked about books, travel, how hard it is to make friends post-college. I mentioned my mom's health issues, and he didn't flinch or change the subject. He leaned closer and asked, "How are you holding up with all that?" That was the moment I felt myself soften. Like maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in again. Then he said, "I want to show you something." I thought maybe it would be a photo, or a poem, or some quote that had changed his life. Instead, he pulled out a navy blue folder from his bag. It had a gold emblem on the front and crisp, laminated pages inside. He laid it on the table between us like it was sacred. I stared at it, confused. He flipped it open. The first page had a pyramid. He started talking. Not about us. Not about connection. Not about anything human. But about entrepreneurship and residual income and unlocking financial sovereignty. I sat there, paralyzed. He turned the next page. It was a chart of income tiers. The top tier had a photo of a woman in a white pantsuit holding champagne next to a Lexus. He said, "She's one of my mentors. She made 6 figures in her second year." I still didn't say anything, because my brain hadn't caught up yet. I was still back in the first 30 minutes. I was still believing this was a date. He kept going. He said, "You strike me as someone who's open-minded. Someone who's ready to level up." He tapped the folder. "This is how we get out of the rat race." I finally spoke. "Wait, is this what you brought me here for?" He smiled genuinely, like he'd just offered me salvation. "I brought you here because I see your potential." "Yusuf," I said quietly, "I thought this was a date." He paused. Then, as if that hadn't occurred to him, said, "Oh, it is. I just believe in building with intention." I stared at him. "You're trying to recruit me." He looked almost hurt. "I'm trying to empower you." I leaned back in my chair, my face burning. The room around me blurred. The clinking of mugs, the sound of the espresso machine, the voices at the next table, they all turned to static. I felt stupid. That's what hit me first. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just shame. Because I'd opened up. I'd let him in. I'd told him about my mom. About the burnout I felt at work. About how I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just that I wanted something real. And he'd nodded. He'd mirrored emotion like a script he'd rehearsed. Because he didn't want me. He wanted a downline. He wanted a new link in his chain of false empowerment. He wanted my vulnerability to become his leverage. I stood up. He said, "Wait, you're leaving?" I said, "I'm not a lead. I'm not a prospect. And I'm not a sale." He looked annoyed now. "You're being reactive. Just hear me out." I said, "I already did. For 30 minutes. And I liked the person you pretended to be." And then I left. I didn't go home right away. I walked 5 blocks and sat on a bench outside a closed bookstore. I called my brother, Yuri. He picked up on the second ring. "How'd it go?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "He used me." Yuri didn't ask what I meant. He just stayed quiet until I was ready. I told him everything. And when I finished, he said, "It's not your fault for trusting someone. It's his fault for manipulating that trust." I cried. Not big, dramatic sobs. Just quiet, exhausted tears. Because I hadn't just lost a date. I'd lost a small piece of hope. I'd let myself believe, for the first time in a long time, that maybe someone could see me for who I was, and want that. Not exploit it. Not monetize it. Want it. And it turned out I was just a target. A name on a list. Another warm body with a bank account and a dream. I wish I could say I confronted him later. That I exposed him. That I wrote a takedown post or got him banned from Bumble. But I didn't. I just disappeared. Blocked him. Deleted the app. And sat with the ache of realizing that sometimes the worst betrayal doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from performance. From someone pretending to care just long enough to get what they want. That date taught me something I didn't want to learn. That not everyone who listens is listening for connection. Some people are listening for opportunity. And the hardest part? He didn't lie to me about the product. He lied about himself. So now, when people ask me why I'm cautious, Why I ask so many questions. Why I sometimes flinch when someone says, "You seem like someone who really listens." This is why. Because once, I thought I was on a date, and it turned out I was just a sales pitch. So I, 32F, went on a date last weekend that left me questioning everything I know about attraction, boundaries, and photo albums. I haven't posted here before, but my friend said this story deserves an audience, so here we go. A few weeks back, I matched with this guy on Bumble. Let's call him Jordan, 33M. We agreed to meet for coffee at this quiet little cafe that has board games and mismatched mugs. Seemed like a good first date spot. Low pressure. So I get there, and Jordan is already seated, black turtleneck, clean-shaven, smiling like he knows a secret. First impression? He looked oddly familiar. Not personally, but something about him gave me déjà vu. I brushed it off. We order drinks, he gets a turmeric latte, which I clock but don't judge, and we start chatting. He's articulate and polite, but there's a weird intensity in how he watches me while I speak. Like he's studying me. About 20 minutes in, he says, "Can I show you something kind of strange? It's a little vulnerable, but I think you'll understand." I pause, but curiosity wins. Sure, why not? He pulls out his phone, opens the Photos app, and says, "And I swear on all that is holy, these are the women I've dated seriously over the last 10 years. He then proceeds to show me a literal slideshow of ex-girlfriends. Names, dates, how they met, what went wrong, accompanied by photos, like a twisted Tinder Hall of Fame. Now listen, I'm not opposed to occasional ex-stories in conversation. We all have a past. But this man had organized a visual retrospective. It was like watching a Ken Burns documentary on his love life. The first girl, brunette, soft features, slight curl to her hair. The second, same. The third, I'm starting to see a pattern. By the fifth woman, I literally say, "Wait, they all kind of look alike." He smiles. "You noticed?" I say, "Do I look like them too?" He grins wider. "That's actually why I swiped on you. You have the same facial structure." And then, with zero hesitation, he says, "They all resemble my mom. She was a beautiful woman. Angelic." Reader, I did not know what to say. I just sipped my coffee and tried not to make direct eye contact with his phone, which was still open to a side-by-side comparison of me and some woman named Marianne, 2017. I asked cautiously, "Is that intentional? Dating women who look like your mom?" He nods. "Absolutely. She set the standard for femininity." That's not weird, right? I did not answer that question. Instead, I asked, "What happened with Marianne?" He sighed. "She didn't respect the maternal archetype. She didn't want kids. How can I build a future without honoring that energy?" At this point, I'm trying to exit the conversation with grace. I say I have to feed my cat, I don't have one, and start gathering my things. Jordan leans forward and says, "I'm just going to say it. You feel familiar. Like home." I say, "That's flattering. But I think we're looking for different things." He nods solemnly, then says, "And I kid you not, I guess you're not ready to be the next chapter in the maternal continuum." What the hell? I leave. I block him on Bumble. I tell my friends. We all scream laugh over wine for 3 hours. But here's the kicker. 2 days later, I get a message from a random Instagram account, no followers, no posts, that just says, "You would have looked beautiful holding our daughter." I blocked it, obviously, but I still think about that date, about the slideshow, about the eerie quiet when he said maternal archetype. And I wonder how many other women with soft features and round cheekbones have been told they feel like home. So yeah, Reddit. That's my story. I went on a date with a man who keeps a photo archive of every woman he's dated, only dates women who resemble his late mother, thinks this is a compliment, calls it the maternal continuum, used a fake Instagram account to send me a final poetic guilt trip. Anyway, I'm taking a break from dating apps. Thanks for listening. Happy to answer questions. I've never liked sharing this story, not because I'm ashamed of what happened, but because I hate the way some people react when I finally get to the part where I say, "No, I didn't scream. No, I didn't fight him off. No, I didn't call the cops. Instead, I lied. And that lie might have saved me." This happened when I was 23. I was still living in Richmond, fresh out of undergrad, and just starting to dip my toes into the dating world again after a long, messy breakup. My friends had been on me for months. "Come on, Callista, just make a profile. You don't even have to go out, just swipe around." So I did. I downloaded one of those early 2010s dating sites, People Meet or something like that. The kind with pixelated profile pictures and awkward bios like, I love long walks and loyalty. That's how I met Kevin. His profile wasn't flashy. Just a simple headshot, a few sentences about being a family man and loving road trips. He lived in Indiana, which I thought was random, but not a deal breaker. When we started chatting, there was an ease to our conversations. Funny, thoughtful, polite. He asked about my family, my job, my favorite books. I felt seen. We talked for almost 3 weeks before he suggested meeting up. I don't mind driving to you, he offered. But what if we meet halfway? That sounded reasonable. A neutral location. Public. Low pressure. So we agreed to meet in a small town between Richmond and wherever he was. I didn't check the weather that day, rookie mistake. I just threw on a sweater, grabbed my overnight bag just in case, and hit the road. About 45 minutes into the drive, it started snowing. Not flurries. Not a cute dusting. I'm talking full-on snowstorm. One of those storms that turns every exit ramp into a guessing game. I should have turned around, but I was already nearly halfway there, and something in me didn't want to be the flaky one. So I kept going. We met at a little Italian place near the highway. When I arrived, Kevin was already at the table, waving at me like he'd known me forever. In person, he looked just like his photo, tall, clean-cut, soft-spoken. Dinner was fine. Not amazing. Not awful. The conversation flowed, but there were a few moments where I noticed something off. When the waiter brought bread, he made a face and said, "You're not going to eat carbs, right?" When I mentioned my job at the local nonprofit, he said, "That's cute. You don't want to do something bigger?" I brushed it off. First dates are awkward. People say weird things. After dinner, he walked me to my car. The snow had picked up, thick and wet and relentless. My windshield was already covered. "Are you driving back in this?" he asked. "I was planning to," I said, but truthfully, I was starting to panic. He glanced at the road. "No way. It's not safe. There's a hotel down the block. I'll get us a room. 2 beds. No pressure." I hesitated. "I'm not trying to make a move," he added quickly. "Seriously. You can even keep your clothes on." He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't laugh. But I also didn't say no. I'd like to say I had a better option. I didn't. I couldn't drive back safely, and the idea of sleeping in my freezing car wasn't exactly appealing. So I agreed. He booked the room. Room 214. 2 double beds, a little TV, and a heater that rattled like a loose bolt in a blender. I took off my coat, kicked off my boots, and got into bed fully clothed. I even left my bag by the door, just in case. We watched TV for a while. He asked if I wanted a drink. I said no. He offered me a massage. I said no. He made a few jokes about 2-bed rules and how no one actually follows them. I laughed politely. I kept my distance. I texted my cousin Cleo to let her know where I was. Then I went to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The room was dark, the TV was off, and I felt pressure on my legs. Kevin. He was on my bed. On top of me. Not fully, but enough. His hand was on my hip. His breath was close to my face. "I was just cold," he whispered. "You looked so warm." I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't shove him off. I didn't even sit up. Instead, I said, "Wait." He paused. "I need to tell you something," I whispered. He leaned back slightly. "What?" "Not here," I said. "Not while I'm lying down. I don't want you to get upset." He sat up slowly, confused. "What are you talking about?" I turned on the lamp. "I have something," I said. "I didn't want to tell you earlier because I didn't want to ruin the night." His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I'm sick," I said. "Not contagious. But it's serious. I haven't told many people. But I'm not someone you can mess around with casually." He looked at me like I'd just turned into a different person. "What do you have?" "I'll tell you tomorrow," I said. I need you to stop. Please." I saw the fear flicker in his eyes. He sat back, suddenly unsure. "Do you have like HIV or something?" I didn't answer. I didn't have anything. Nothing at all. But I knew that fear would work better than resistance. He got up. He didn't touch me again that night. I barely slept. I kept one eye on the door and one hand on my phone. As soon as the sun came up, I packed my bag. He was still pretending to sleep. I left without saying goodbye. At the gas station, he texted me. "What did you have to tell me?" I texted back. "I'm a virgin. That's all. But I needed a way to get you off of me." He never replied. I blocked his number, deleted the app, cried in the car, called Cleo. She drove 2 hours just to sit with me while I ate hash browns and tried not to sob into my eggs. I should have left the restaurant, I told her. I should have known. No, she said. He should have respected you. He should have known. That line stuck with me for years. Because that's the thing, right? We grow up learning how to avoid danger. Don't walk alone at night. Don't leave your drink unattended. Don't go to a second location. But the rules don't always apply when the danger has a smile and pays for dinner. Kevin didn't hit me. He didn't force himself on me. But he crossed a line. A big one. He saw me sleeping and decided that my body was fair game. And even now, nearly a decade later, I still think about that moment, his hand on my hip, his breath in my ear, and wonder what would have happened if I hadn't lied. Would I have had to scream? Would anyone have heard me? Would he have stopped? There's no way to know. But I'm glad I thought fast. I'm glad I used fear. I'm glad I got out. And I'm sharing this now because I want other women to know your instincts are not overreactions. Your fear is not foolish. Your boundaries are valid. And if you ever find yourself in a hotel room with someone who doesn't respect the word no, you don't owe them honesty. You owe yourself safety. Lie if you have to. Yell if you have to. Run if you can. You don't have to be polite. You don't have to explain. You don't have to make them feel better about making you feel unsafe. Kevin was just one night in my life. But the lesson stuck. There's a particular kind of sadness in getting dressed for someone who won't remember what you wore. I'd spent the better part of an hour getting ready. Nothing dramatic, just enough to feel like I'd put a version of myself forward that said, I'm trying. I wore my dark green dress with the flutter sleeves. It made me feel like I belonged in a painting. I curled a few strands of hair, added a hint of mascara. I even brought out the perfume I usually saved for weddings. I wanted to like him. That's the thing. It wasn't desperation. It was hope. We'd messaged for a week or so. His texts were a mix of clever and clumsy, which I found endearing. He used full sentences. He asked questions. He said things like, tell me about a book that changed you. Not WID. His name was Wilfred, old-fashioned but charming. He said he worked in film post-production, lived in Camden, and had 3 nieces he adored. I liked that he didn't try to be cool. He said he'd rather talk in person than text endlessly, so we agreed to meet for a late dinner at a little bistro tucked away in Clerkenwell. I arrived at 8:03 p.m. He did not. At 8:12, I ordered sparkling water and told the waiter I was still waiting for someone. At 8:24, I texted, still good to meet tonight? At 8:31, he replied, be there in 10. Sorry, bit of a delay. I watched the door like it might apologize on his behalf. When he arrived, it was 8:49. He stumbled slightly coming through the entrance. I knew. Before he spoke, before he even reached the table, I knew. He was drunk. Not tipsy. Not post-1-pint fuzzy. Drunk. His eyes were glossy, his cheeks flushed, and his jacket hung off one shoulder like he hadn't noticed it was falling. He grinned when he saw me. A big, sloppy, unearned grin. Sharon, he said loudly. I blinked. It's Yold, I said. He paused. Squinted. Then laughed. Right. Sorry. Just, you look like a Sharon I knew. Uni days. Mad woman. Great legs. He slumped into the chair across from me with the grace of a collapsing marionette. I sat still, spine straight, hands folded in my lap. He waved at the waiter with exaggerated flair. Bottle of red. House. Cheers. The waiter glanced at me. I gave a small shake of the head. Just water for me, I said. Wilfred leaned in, elbows on the table, breath heavy with beer and something sweeter. Cider, maybe. You look stunning, he said. Really? Like, Art Deco stunning. Proper. Thank you, I said quietly. He talked. Mostly about himself. He told me about a party he'd just come from, some rap celebration for a short film he wasn't even working on. Didn't plan to stay, he slurred. But you know how it is. 1 turns into 3. Turns into 7. Then you're doing shots with a bloke named Damson. Who names their child Damson? I didn't laugh. He didn't notice. He asked me what I did, then interrupted halfway through my answer to tell me about a time he'd been shortlisted for a BAFTA Newcomer Award. Didn't win, obviously. But shortlist counts, right? I nodded. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe because I wanted to see if there was anything salvageable beneath the wreckage. Maybe because I hoped he'd sober. Settle. Maybe because it felt rude to leave someone in that state. But mostly, I think I stayed because leaving would have meant admitting I'd made a mistake, that I'd chosen wrong again, and I was tired of being wrong. Eventually, I excused myself to the toilet. I stared at my reflection for a long time. The mascara was still intact. The curls had held, but my eyes were tired. Not from the night, from all the nights before. I came back to find him pouring wine into a water glass. "Waiter took the proper ones," he said. "Had to improvise." He grinned, and then he asked me what I thought of Sharon. I froze. "I'm sorry." He leaned back, arms stretched over the chair like he owned the space. "You know, Sharon, my ex, we were together 4 years. Thought we'd marry, but she fancied someone else. An architect. Has a beard like a broom." I didn't speak. He went on. "She said I was too much. Said I made her feel like she was always managing a fire. Can you believe that?" I believed it. He drained the glass. "You remind me of her. Not in a bad way. Just something around the eyes. The way you tilt your head." I wanted to scream. Instead I said, "Wilfred, why did you come tonight?" He blinked. "I came for you." "No," I said. "You came drunk. You called me Sharon. You haven't asked me a single real question. You came for something else entirely." He looked away. For the first time that night, he looked ashamed. "I didn't know I'd drink that much," he said. "I was nervous, I think." "About what?" He shrugged. "Being seen." I didn't know what to say to that. He looked up at me, suddenly sober in his sadness. "She used to say I was exhausting. That I wanted too much, too fast. That I read meanings where there weren't any. And was she right?" He laughed once bitterly. "Probably." I stood up. He didn't stop me. Didn't reach for my hand or ask me to stay. He just nodded. Once. I left the bistro and walked until my feet ached. When I got home, I called Shauna, my closest friend. The kind of friend who knows when to speak and when to listen. She answered on the first ring. "How bad?" "Bad," I said. "He called me Sharon." "Oh, yold." I told her everything. She didn't say I should have left sooner. She didn't say, "He's not worth it." She just said, "I'm sorry. That sucks. You deserved better." And that helped. I slept poorly. I kept replaying the moment he smiled and called me someone else. The way he had looked right at me and saw a ghost. The next morning, I had a message. "I made a mess of things. You're lovely." I was an idiot. "If you ever want to try again, properly, I'd like to." I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because I refused to be someone's Sharon. I wanted to be chosen, not mistaken. Seen, not mirrored. I checked the mirror 3 times before I left. Hair, not tragic. Shirt, not wrinkled. Shoes, not offensive. I was nervous, but not in a bad way. More like hopeful. Cautiously optimistic. Verity and I had been chatting for a couple of weeks. She was dry-humored, clever, and had a knack for sending voice notes that made me laugh aloud in public, which I always took as a good sign. We were supposed to meet for an early dinner in Hampstead. She'd chosen the place, some place with plates to share and fairy lights. I didn't know what to expect, but I liked that. I liked that she seemed to know what she wanted. At 5:02 p.m., I got the message. "Hey, weird situation. Can we meet at St. Margaret's Church on Finchley Road instead? I'll explain. Please come." I stared at it for a full minute. Checked the address. Then typed, "Is everything all right?" She replied instantly. "Just meet me there. It won't take long. I promise." Now I know how this sounds, but something about her tone, even in text, felt urgent without being alarming. So I went. I walked up to the church steps at 5:30 sharp, wearing a navy blazer and my best attempt at a date-ready smile. There were people gathered in small clusters, dressed in black. Women clutched tissues. Men stood with hands in pockets, eyes downcast. A funeral. I froze. Before I could turn around, I heard her voice. "Yardley." She approached quickly, her black coat buttoned to the throat, her hair pinned back, face pale but calm. "I'm so sorry," she said. "This is mental. Thank you for coming." "What is this?" "My Nan's funeral," she said, like it was a change of venue rather than a seismic event. I blinked. "Your Nan's funeral?" "She died last week." I didn't want to cancel. I didn't want to be alone after. I didn't know what to say. "I thought we were going to dinner." "We still can," she said. "After." I needed something normal. Something not sad. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it. The grief, just beneath the surface. The kind that hardens around your throat, but hasn't quite broken through. I nodded. Not because I understood, but because I couldn't say no to that face. We went inside. I sat with her and a woman she introduced as Nell, her cousin. The service had already started. I listened to the vicar talk about a life well lived. I watched old women dab their eyes and young girls pass tissues. At one point, Verity took my hand. It felt wrong and right at the same time. After the final hymn, we stood outside while people smoked and made small talk. Verity leaned against the stone wall and closed her eyes. "You okay?" I asked. She opened them. "Not really, but I'm glad you came." "Why me?" She shrugged. "You seemed kind, and I didn't want to cry alone." Before I could respond, Nell leaned over. "You're the date?" I nodded. She smiled faintly. "She's not normally like this." I figured. She adored Nan. But she's weird about death. Always has been. She thinks if she doesn't stop moving, it can't catch her. Verity rolled her eyes. "Don't psychoanalyze me on the pavement." Nell winked. "Just helping your date understand what he's walked into." They laughed. I didn't. Not because I wasn't trying, but because I felt like I'd wandered into someone else's story. Later, we walked toward the high street in silence. Verity stopped outside a pub. "Can we just sit for a bit?" I nodded. We ordered 2 pints and found a corner booth. She stared at her glass. "She always said I was too dramatic," she said. "Nan, that I made everything bigger than it needed to be. Maybe you just feel things deeply." She looked up. "That's what my therapist says." We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "I didn't mean to drag you into this. I just didn't want to cancel. I didn't want to go back to my flat and listen to the silence." "I understand," I said. But I didn't. Not really. I didn't understand what it meant to take a stranger to grief like it was a first date. I didn't understand how I could feel both needed and invisible at the same time. She talked about her Nan for a while. Showed me a photo. Told me about the time they got matching tattoos when Verity was 19 and heartbroken. She said, "If someone's going to mark your body, let it be someone who loves you." "That's beautiful," I said. She was. Around 8 p.m., she checked her phone. "I should go home. My mom's expecting me." I stood, hands in pockets. She hesitated, then kissed me on the cheek. "Thank you, Yardley." I nodded. She left, and I stood there, in the corner of a pub full of strangers, wondering what had just happened. Was it a date? Was it a cry for help? Was it the beginning of something twisted, or the end of something that never began? I walked home, blazer still buttoned, hands cold. When I got in, I called my mom. She asked how the date went. I said, "It wasn't a date. It was a funeral." She said, "Do you want to talk about it?" I said, "Not yet," because I didn't know how. The next morning, I got a message. "Thank you for yesterday. I know it was a lot. I'm really sorry. I hope you don't think I'm completely mad." I typed out a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. "You're not mad. You're grieving. I hope you have the support you need. I'd still like to get that dinner sometime. Just, maybe with less eulogy." She replied, "Deal." There are a dozen ways a date can go wrong. Someone shows up late. Someone talks too much. Someone says they don't believe in therapy, or orders steak well done and chews with their mouth open. But nothing prepares you for the moment your date unzips her purse, pulls out a photo of her childhood, and points to a boy in the back row, then says, "That one's my cousin Eustace's grandson. We lost touch. Isn't he sweet?" And it's you. Your awkward, buck-toothed, 11-year-old face. In a wallet-sized photo, held by a woman you were just starting to really like. We met at a Georgian-style cafe near King's Cross. I was early, I always am, and she arrived exactly 5 minutes late, which I've come to understand is the perfect amount of lateness. It communicates effort, but not desperation. Her name was Fenella, one of those names that feels like it belongs in a Bronte novel or a family crest. She wore a navy pea coat and a soft smile. She looked like she belonged in an autumn painting. Leaves and lamplight and all that. We clicked quickly, the way you sometimes do when conversation doesn't have to be dragged like a heavy suitcase. We talked about books, family quirks, the weirdness of being in our 30s and still feeling 17 sometimes. She had this lovely way of pausing before she spoke, like she was choosing her words with care. We ordered tea and scones. She asked about my family. I told her about my mom's obsession with ancestry websites, how she once stayed up until 4 a.m. trying to trace our lineage back to a man who was probably a cooper in Devon. Fenella laughed and said, "My mom's the same." She carries old photos in her purse, like actual printed ones. Then, as though it were the most natural thing in the world, she opened her bag and pulled out a small leather pouch. "I've got some of them here," she said, flipping it open. "I always mean to scan them." She showed me a photo of her as a toddler in a paddling pool, one of her parents' wedding, one of a family reunion, a long table in someone's garden, bunting in the background, paper hats, and jelly trifle. Then she tapped the edge of the photo with her finger. "That's Eustace, my mum's uncle. And that's his grandson, I think. We only met a few times. I remember he had the same hair as me when we were little." See? I looked, and I froze, because there in the back row, standing awkwardly with a paper plate in hand, was me. Or rather, the younger version of me. Same ears, same fringe, same mole near the left eyebrow. I stared at it, then at her, then back again. I felt the blood drain from my face. She noticed. "Are you all right?" I cleared my throat. "Where was this taken?" "Somewhere in Surrey, I think. Late 90s. "Why?" I swallowed. "That's me." She blinked. "Sorry? That's me. In the photo. That's my face. That's my jumper. I remember that reunion. There was lemon drizzle cake and a man who played the accordion." She stared at me. "No. Really?" I nodded. She leaned closer, eyes scanning the photo, then me. "Oh my God," she whispered. "That's actually you." Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. Then she said very slowly, "So we're cousins?" I didn't answer right away. I was still trying to process the fact that I had just flirted with, and was mildly infatuated with, a woman who had photographic evidence of me as a child in her wallet. I said, "What's your mum's maiden name?" "Chumley." I closed my eyes. "That's my grandmother's maiden name." She sat back. "Oh my God." Neither of us touched the tea. Eventually I said, "Okay. So, this is surreal." Fenella nodded. "And very British." We both laughed. A little too loudly. The couple at the next table gave us a look. I said, "So we're cousins." "Distant cousins," she clarified. "I think. Fourth or fifth, maybe." "Still." She nodded, then covered her mouth with her hand and laughed again. "I feel like I should be calling you Cousin Isolde now. Like we're in some period drama." I smiled, but my brain was spinning. Because I'd liked her. Not just as a date, but as a possibility. And now she was family. Technically. Awkwardly. Unavoidably. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "Well, that explains why you looked familiar." I thought it was just my generic man with glasses face. "No," she said. "It was more like déjà vu, but real." I nodded. "Do you want to end the date?" I asked. She hesitated. "I mean, yeah, probably." Right. She looked disappointed. And I felt it too. Not just the end of the date, but the end of something unspoken. The end of what could have been. Later that evening, I called my mum. She answered on the second ring. "Everything all right, darling? Did we go to a family reunion in Surrey in 1998? "Yes, why? There was a man who played the accordion?" "Yes, great-uncle Eustace hired him for his birthday." I rubbed my forehead. "And did I have a cousin named Fenella?" "Oh yes," she said. "Sweet girl. You used to play with her. She had a doll named Edgar." I paused. "You never thought to mention I might bump into her as an adult?" "Oh, we lost touch with that side of the family ages ago. Her mum moved to Dorset, I think." "Why?" "No reason," I said. "Isolde?" "Nothing. Just ran into someone familiar today." She hummed, clearly unconvinced, but let it go. I hung up and sat in silence for a while. Not sad, exactly. Just disoriented. The next morning, I had a message. From Fenella. Well, that was certainly the oddest date I've ever been on. But also kind of lovely. "I'm glad we met. Even if we're related. Maybe especially because we are, in a weird way. I'd still like to see you again. As a cousin. Or a friend. Or both. Thoughts?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then replied. "Agreed. Lovely and very, very odd. Let's get coffee next week. No romance. No kissing. Just genealogical updates and scones. Deal." She wrote back. "Deal. Cousin." And that was that. A date that began with potential and ended with a photo. A face in a crowd that turned out to be mine. A reminder that in this city, in this tangled country, sometimes the person you're drawn to shares more with you than just a sense of humor. Sometimes they share your blood. I didn't mean to start an argument. All I did was make a joke. An offhand joke, over risotto, about how the wine list was still more coherent than Britain's post-Brexit trade strategy. It was a throwaway line. Dry. Harmless, I thought. But Quentin didn't laugh. He set his fork down gently, like he was afraid of making a sound. Then he looked at me, not annoyed, not amused, just wounded. "Do you always talk about politics over dinner?" he asked. I blinked. "That wasn't really politics. It was a joke." He nodded once. "It's never just a joke though, is it?" I tilted my head. "All right. Would you rather I'd said nothing? I'd rather we didn't pretend the EU was some utopia." And there it was. The shift. The moment you realize the person across from you isn't quite who you thought they were. I'd known Quentin for 3 weeks. We met at a gallery opening, one of those half-boring, half-brilliant affairs where wine is free and conversation is currency. He'd been standing beside a sculpture shaped like a fractured map of Europe. Fitting in retrospect. He said something clever about post-national identity. I replied with something sarcastic. And we clicked. Or so I thought. We'd been on 2 dates before this. Coffee. A walk in the park. Light things. Pleasant things. He was thoughtful. Soft-spoken. Always made room for my sentences. But now, here in this dimly lit Italian restaurant, I was seeing something else. Something brittle. I tried to keep my tone light. I didn't mean anything by it. I just think it's a bit of a mess right now. Even people who voted leave admit that. He looked down at his napkin. I voted leave. The words landed like stones. I stared at him. "Oh," I said. And then, perhaps stupidly, I added, "Why?" He flinched. "I don't think I should have to defend it over dinner." "That's fair," I said. "But you did bring it up." He sighed. "It's not that simple. It never is." He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his face changed. "I lost my job," he said quietly. "In 2015. They moved the department to Amsterdam. Said it was more strategic for the European market." I opened my mouth. Closed it. "And then my dad died," he continued. "Same year. Stroke. He worked his whole life, paid his taxes, never complained. And in the end, he couldn't even get an appointment with a GP for 3 weeks. Mum said he kept saying, 'What's the point of this country if we can't even look after our own?'" His voice cracked. And then, to my horror, he started crying. Not sobbing, not wailing, just silent, steady tears. Right in the middle of a restaurant with candlelight and clinking cutlery, and a couple on the next table whispering about dessert. I didn't know what to do. I passed him a napkin. He wiped his eyes. "Sorry," he said. "This is mortifying." "It's all right," I said, even though I didn't know if it was. "I just don't like being made to feel stupid," he said. "Like everyone who voted leave is some racist idiot who doesn't understand the world." "I don't think you're stupid," I said honestly. "But you think I'm wrong." I hesitated. "Yes," I said. "But that doesn't mean I don't want to understand." He nodded. "I'm just tired," he said. "Tired of having to justify why I feel like a stranger in my own country." And I got that. Not the same way. But I understood what it felt like to feel like your country was slipping through your fingers. That the version of it you loved was being overwritten by one you didn't recognize. We finished our meals in near silence. He paid the bill. We walked outside. It had started to drizzle, that thin London rain that makes everything feel like a memory. He turned to me. "I like you, Isella. Really. But I don't think we're on the same side of things." "Maybe not," I said. "But I don't think sides are the only thing that matter." He gave a small, sad smile. "Sometimes they're the only thing that does." He kissed my cheek, light, brief, almost apologetic, and walked away. I stood there, under a flickering streetlight, feeling like the dinner had never really happened. Later that night, I called my sister Maeve. She picked up and said, "So, how was Mr. Brooding?" I told her. All of it. The joke. The tears. The backstory. She was quiet for a while. Then said, "You know what's weird about this country now? We're all grieving. But for different things. And we don't know how to talk about it without thinking the other person's grief is wrong." I didn't reply. Because she was right. I wasn't angry at Quentin. I was heartbroken for both of us. For the different versions of England we were mourning. And for the quiet, lovely thing that might have grown between us, if only we hadn't been standing on opposite shores. I agreed to the date because he said he liked libraries. Not in the smug, performative way that men on dating apps sometimes do. The "I'm very into Proust but haven't read the bell jar" kind of way, but with a quiet sincerity. He'd written, I like being surrounded by stories that aren't mine. That line stayed with me. So when Cashin suggested Thai food in Soho and mentioned he'd be wearing his existentialist trainers, I thought, sure. Why not? He was early, which immediately made me like him less. I know that's irrational, but there's something disarming about walking into a restaurant and seeing your date already seated, already watching the door, already existing in the world without you. He stood when I approached. Tall, crisp white shirt, curls like he'd been tousling them just before I arrived. "You're Morven," he said, like it was a line from a script. "I am." We sat. The waiter brought water and menus. I reached for mine. And that's when Cashin said, "Just so you know, none of this is real." I looked up. "Sorry?" He smiled, one dimple deepening. "This is a simulation. A closed beta test for a new reality-based dating experiment. You're doing great so far." I blinked. "Are you joking?" He tilted his head. "Not really." I laughed once awkwardly. "Okay." He leaned in, elbows on the table, eyes focused like a lens. "Don't worry. I'm not allowed to break character fully, but I can tell you this much. We're being observed. Not maliciously. Just monitored. For compatibility metrics." I stared at him. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't say, "Just kidding." I opened my menu. "Right. Well, I'd like to be observed eating pad thai." He nodded. "Excellent choice. That will score well." I looked around the restaurant. Nothing seemed out of place. Couples. Waiters. Ambient lighting. No blinking red lights or microphones. Unless the simulation was really good. He asked me about my job. I told him I worked in publishing. He said, narrative manipulation. That'll definitely get flagged." I tried to laugh. I really did. But there was something about the way he said it, casual, assured, like he knew something I didn't, that made my stomach twist. The food arrived. I twirled noodles onto my fork. He watched me. Not in a sleazy way. In an anthropological way. Like I was a bird in a documentary. Halfway through the meal, he said, "Do you ever get the feeling your memories have been edited?" I paused. Swallowed. "No." He nodded, satisfied. "That's good. Means your baseline is still intact." I put my fork down. "Cashin, what is this?" He smiled again. "It's just dinner. But you're acting like you're not real." "I'm real. I'm just not permanent." "Great," I said. "That's very reassuring." He sipped his water. "You're taking this well. Most people panic. Start checking the salt shakers for cameras." I rubbed my temples. "Do you actually believe this is a simulation?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Would it change anything if it were?" I stared at him. "I don't know. Probably not. I'd still want garlic prawns." He grinned. "Exactly." The rest of the date continued like that, strange, circular conversations about perception and identity and whether time was a construct. He never broke. Not once. Not even when I asked him outright, "Are you doing a bit?" He just said, "Do you want me to be?" When the bill came, I offered to split it. He said, "No need. It's all coded." Outside, the air was cool and slick with mist. We stood near the curb. He looked up at the sky. "Do you ever wonder if the moon's just a placeholder?" "I wonder if you're okay," I said. He turned to me. "I think I'm the most okay I've ever been." I stopped pretending this was real, and everything got easier. I didn't know what to say. So I said, "Good night." He leaned in, not for a kiss, but like he was about to whisper a secret. Instead, he said, "Thank you for participating." I walked away, and didn't look back. When I got home, I found Dev on the sofa, eating crisps and watching a documentary about haunted pubs. He looked up. "Well, he thinks he's in a simulation." Dev paused. "Like metaphorically?" "No. Like literally." Dev blinked. "Did he try to unplug anything?" "No. But he did say the moon wasn't real." Dev whistled. "Wow. That's a new one." I sat down beside him. I think he meant it. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe it was a test. Maybe I failed. Dev passed me the crisps. Maybe he's just lonely. And pretending the world isn't real makes it hurt less. I chewed. Stared at the screen. A pub ghost flickered into view. I said, "Maybe." I wore my first date optimism clip in my hair. It's shaped like a tiny bow and made of tortoiseshell. Nothing fancy. But I wear it when I want to feel like something good might happen. Like I might say something clever. Or laugh too hard. Or meet someone who doesn't make me regret trying. I hadn't worn it in 6 months. Not since Hugo, The man with the 7 cats and the uncanny ability to steer every conversation toward 18th century naval warfare. But Bertram seemed different. He'd messaged me first. Polite. Literate. Said he liked my profile because I used the word quiet 3 times, and he liked quiet people. Said he was recently back in the dating world after a long chapter, and was trying to be brave. I appreciated the honesty. We arranged to meet at a book-lined cafe in Bloomsbury. He arrived right on time, in a navy jumper and cord trousers, holding a newspaper under one arm like we were in a different decade. He looked exhausted in a gentle sort of way, like someone who spent the last few months trying not to cry in public. I liked him immediately, until he sat down and pulled out a manila folder. I thought maybe it was a notebook, or a manuscript, or something charming and eccentric. But no, it was his divorce paperwork. He set it on the table like a menu. I blinked. He smiled a little too wide. Sorry, he said. I came straight from my solicitors. No problem, I said. You could have left that in your bag, though. He looked down at it like it had betrayed him. Right. Of course. Sorry. He tucked it away. We ordered coffee. And that's when it started. The monologue. She said she didn't love me anymore. After 15 years. Just said it like it was the weather. I nodded. She took the cat. And the sofa. I don't mind the sofa, but the cat, that was low. He didn't ask me a single question. Not one. He just spilled. And not in a cathartic way. In the way someone does when they've been holding their breath for months, and finally found someone soft enough to collapse on. I became a sponge. His story unfolded in chapters. How they met at university. How they moved to Bristol. How she worked in publishing and always corrected his grammar, even in arguments. He told me about their wedding playlist. Their first miscarriage. The time they almost bought a canal boat. I sipped my coffee in silence. I didn't mind at first. I've always been good at holding space, at letting people unravel. But at some point, maybe around the time he pulled out his phone to show me a photo of their old flat, I realized I wasn't on a date. I was in a confessional, and I didn't want to be his priest. I wanted to be a woman in a tortoiseshell hair clip, smiling into her cappuccino, maybe brushing knees under the table. Not a stranger offering absolution over oat milk and emotional debris. I interrupted gently. Bertram, I'm really sorry you're going through this. But can I ask, are you ready to be dating? He looked startled. I am, he said quickly. I need to move on. Needing to move on isn't the same as being ready. He looked down at his coffee. I just don't know how to be alone. That sentence hung between us. Heavy, honest, and not mine to fix. I said, I think you're very brave for trying. But maybe the first person you date shouldn't be the one holding your grief. He looked up, and to his credit, he didn't argue. He nodded. You're right. I'm so sorry. This isn't fair to you. You're lovely. And I've made this something else. It's okay, I said. And I meant it. We sat in silence for a bit. Then he smiled, the real kind, not the one people wear like armor. You've got glitter on your cheek, he said. I wiped it away. It's from my flatmate's bath bomb. He laughed. Thank you, Adeline, for listening. Even if this wasn't a real date. It was real, I said. Just not the kind either of us hoped for. We hugged goodbye outside the cafe. It wasn't romantic. It was something quieter. Sadder. More human. That night, I got home and found Glynn, my flatmate, eating cereal out of a mixing bowl. She looked up. How'd it go? He brought his divorce papers. She choked on a cornflake. Sorry, what? Literally. Set them on the table like an appetizer. She cackled. Then sobered. You okay? Yeah, I said. Just tired. Not of him. Just of being the soft place people land when they fall apart. I want someone who's still standing. She nodded. And then, because she knows me, said, You wore the clip, didn't you? I reached up and took it out. Held it in my palm. Maybe next time.